I'm Chris Lawson, your host. I'm glad to be joined today by Pastor Alan Wright. How are you, Pastor?
Oh, I'm doing great, Chris. Had a wonderful weekend to celebrate 40 years of marriage, and which is going to be a subject we're talking about today. But it is amazing, isn't it? We'll talk a little bit about this on the podcast, but just a weekend away to just enjoy being with each other, being with husband and wife, just being together, and just we had a ball, had fun. Went down to Disney World. We love Disney World, and I woke up this morning. I just said to my wife, I gave her a kiss this morning. I said, "Good morning, honey." I said, I feel happier, and refreshed is a good way to think about it. And hopefully, lots of our listeners are going to find some refreshment this summer.
Interesting, Pastor Allen. We've been working together for over 2 decades, and I think there's a lot of things that our family has kind of co-opted from your family. There's a great story. I'll tell it real fast about. I used to teach some high school history, and your youngest Abby was in that class, and I was talking about favorite Christmas celebrations, and I talked about this feeding the reindeer or putting glitter and oats out in the driveway, and everybody was loving the idea, but Abby wasn't laughing. And I said, Abby, you not like this idea? She said, I love that idea. It's our idea. You stole it. And I was like, oh, but what reminded me of is one of the principles that we've learned from your family, which is that the family that plays together stays together.
Yes.
And y'all had a good weekend playing together.
We just had a good week playing together, and again, I really say to all our listeners, it is one of the. I mean, the Sabbath principle is not just about a weekly rhythm, and we'll talk a little bit about that in today's podcast when we talk about marriage. But it also is a seasonal rhythm. So people sometimes say, "Well, how have you guys? I know you work really hard out, and I do, and I think, but we take our vacation and we enjoy it when we do. So sometimes we might even overwork before vacation, but there's something to be said for that. Like just
Work
pull
hard, play
back
hard.
and play. Work hard, play hard.
That's right. Well, we've titled this "What 40 Years of Marriage Have Taught Me About the Covenant of Grace." And so let's start there. Let's dive into number one. What has 40 years of marriage taught you?
Well, the first thing that 40 years of marriage taught me is the power of covenant and the power, therefore, of unconditional love and grace. And this is the covenant that we have with God through Jesus Christ. So the old covenant, it was a gift, right? The law was a gift because it's part of God's revelation. I always say the law is not bad, the law is good. When God reveals something about himself or reveals anything about how you ought to live, if he just says, hey, you ought to wash your hands, listen, that's a revelation from God, that's good. But it was a covenant of law and no one could keep it. And if you bring a covenant of law idea into your marriage, nobody's going to be able to keep it. I often laugh and say, we often operate by this system in relationship of like who's got the most chips. It's like husband, you do a great job and you celebrate your wife's birthday, you get some chips, in your pockets, and then but if you forget the anniversary, you not only lost those chips, it will cost you some more chips, and it's kind of tit for tat, like, well, that's kind of the way law-based relationship is. It's like who's got the upper hand, who's done more good for the other, and what I've learned in marriage is the greatest place in the world to realize that will never work. Um, if the relationship is based on, well, I've done better than you or you owe me, you've got kind of a law-based relationship, and it never works. The marriage relationship is a covenant, but it's more like the new covenant. It's a covenant of grace. It's a covenant of unconditional love. To be in Christ, to be a child of God, is an image of Him been adopted, not by your own merits, but by His. And the image of being like the bride of the bridegroom Christ. It really is, though our modern ears can find this a little objectionable, it really is an image of prearranged marriage, which has been the largest way that couples have come together in the history of the world. Is like, okay, you would be good for one another, why don't you meet one another? And so the idea of covenant and the idea of marriage are like this, because what covenant really is from God's perspective is something that is full of grace and lack of condition. It is just, I love you, period. I accept you, period. So Ann and I think probably when we look at 40 years of marriage, we never thought about, well, should we stay together or not? It's more like, we've got kids. Do we stay with our kids? Well, they're our kids. It's like we belong to each other and we're family. We're husband and wife. So in the ups and downs, it's like we're in this covenant, but it's not a covenant of law. It's a covenant of grace. Jeremiah 31:3. I've loved you with an everlasting love. It is not something new when we get to the new covenant. It is what God's always wanted to have, a covenant of grace with his people. And that's what marriage is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, move us on to another number two, which is about you got to be pulling in the same direction as a couple.
Well, everything that we do as Christians, we really are doing as joint heirs with Christ. Like even like we'll talk about the Great Commission. Well, a co-mission is with mission. It is mission with Jesus. The greatest way that we can ever be motivated as Christians is not by shame, like I better measure up or God's not going to bless me, and not by any form of law, like I'll get punished if I don't do more. But the way that we get really motivated is that we begin to see ourselves as owners of a mission. That we're going in the same direction as Christ, and we're yoked with Christ. We're moving together with Christ. And I think this is one of the most important keys to marriage, Chris, is that you basically are headed in the same direction in life. I mean, it's wonderful, all the things that can attract a man and a woman to one another. I mean, it's wonderful if you like to have fun about the same things. It's wonderful if there's romantic attraction. There's wonderful. All of that can be wonderful. But the biggest question I would ever have for a young couple is wanting to know, should we get married? Like, are you headed in the same path of life? And it's a mirror of what God really has intended for us. It's not like God is the master and we're the slave. It's more like we're friends of Jesus. It's more like we're married with him and we're going in the same direction. And I think that's one of the most beautiful gifts we've had in our marriage is right from the beginning. Not only did my wife have a sense of call herself to ministry, but she really envisioned herself being in this kind of role. So the fact that we're in such full partnership and we're not one pulling this way and one pulling that way, not just about ministry, but partnership in the way we parent. We never thought, we always wanted to be as one. We never had a time in which we were triangling with our kids because we're now trying to get sides with this one over against the spouse. No, we're one and we're one mission. And here's the way God sees us. We are at one in with Christ and we're on one mission with Jesus. And I think this is a picture of that. It gets played out in marriage in the beginning. Joint mission.
Joint mission. One of the things that's interesting, Alan, that I'd love to hear you talk about is that you both do ministry work. Sometimes the dad works outside the home, the mom works in the home, or maybe both spouses are employed, and you got to be talking about these things. So when you and Ann feel like, hey, maybe we're drifting apart, meaning we're not pulling in the same direction, it's not a joint mission. What does that coming back together look like? How does that conversation begin with a couple if they're looking to
Right,
glean
right.
that?
Well, I mean, sometimes we'll just even use the actual phrase, right? When we're getting in a spat or whatever, and say, wait a minute, we're on the same team. And just like literally stop and remind ourselves we're on the same team. We love the scripture in 1 Peter 3:7 that we're called to be heirs together of the grace of life. And so we're on the same team, but we're also both co-heirs with Christ. And I think we both also know that because we're in a covenant of grace, I'm not going anywhere, you're not going anywhere. So let's never treat one another as if we might have disagreement, but let's don't treat each other as if, well, this is catastrophic. Let's not use language that says, well, this just isn't going to work, that kind of thing. So we're on the same team. We're joint heirs together with Christ as heirs of life. We're recipients of the same grace from God, and we have a common mission. And we just will come back and articulate. It's almost like in any organization where if you had a mission statement and you just keep coming back to that, you just keep coming back to that. And so, in a sense, that's what we do. We just keep coming back to this is what we're called to. I love this from Elizabeth Elliot. A good marriage, she said, is not one where each partner has found his or her soulmate, but one where each has chosen to love the other as Christ loves the church, and both are committed to a common goal bigger than themselves. I love that. It's like getting something that's bigger than me, that's bigger than my own dreams and ambitions. It's we're both committed to it, and I think that's what we have in the gospel.
So number one, we're covenantal love. This is a love that's different than other kind of love. God set it apart. Number two, realize that we're on the same team. I think it's a good line. When we want to fight with each other, you might get mad at your buddy for missing a free throw, but you don't throw the basketball at him. You say, "Come on, we're on this together, right?" And then number three, this is one of your biggest principles, and people who've read your books and get your daily blessing realize that power of blessing is a big deal, and that isn't just something you use with your employees or with your kids. You use it with your spouse.
Yes, because blessing, which we mean a positive vision of the future spoken over another with faith in accord with God's word, because we believe it does have with it a kind of mystical grace that actually moves a person towards that vision. Not just that it raises the expectancy of that person, but I think that it has almost a prophetic or supernatural quality to it. And so we both believe in that. And we don't always perfectly bless one another, but I've been spending most of my married life wanting to learn about this so that the way that we speak over one another is blessing. It is to say that when we want to help one another, and even if we are frustrated at a given point in time, we want to try to speak it in the language of blessing. And it's really good if I am off base of as finding a good way to say, that's not who you really are. That's not who I expect you to be. And we'll call each other on it too. If someone speaks something that's not blessing, um, we'll we'll say, wait a minute, honey, that's not what I want to agree with. I don't think that's the future you see for me either. So this is partly training, and this is part of what I wrote about in The Power to Bless. It's like anybody can learn to do this. It isn't like just, oh, there's some super spiritual people and they just are full of blessing to give others. No, this is something you can actually train your mouth. You can train your speech to speak blessing over one another. It is like the actual impartation of grace. It's like Dallas Willard said, it's like you're taking good and you're in a sense infusing it to the other. This is how we're doing that. So one of the things that we do is we regularly have moments where we will just actually speak blessing over one another. Did this with the kids around the dinner table at least once a week, where I would just speak a blessing to my wife and to the kids, making sure we do that. But we also would just, in a daily practice, count our blessings as well. In other words, it is creating a positive environment, but it is actually taking the very way that God interacts with us and putting into place in marriage. So if I'm going to love my wife as Christ loved the church, what he did was he blessed the church. The very last thing Jesus did was he lifted his hands and he blessed even as he was ascending into heaven. And it's the first thing God did. He blessed Adam and Eve, and then he said, be fruitful and multiply. So we really believe that. We believe that our fruitfulness is stemming from blessing, that our productivity is not something that we have and then we say, oh, you were productive, we'll bless you. We believe it's going to help one another. And I think when you get that through your mind, it's like, I want that. And often just, I'll say to myself, like, listen, what the most important thing in the world to you, Alan, is your wife. who you live with. And I want, if I had a car that was really important to me, I'd probably be out there shining it, helping it have its greatest luster. If there was if there was some other physical treasure I have, I'd take care of it. Well, there's nothing greater to take care of or to want to bring to its full luster than my wife. And I think blessing is the means by which we do that day in, day out.
That's so great. Well, one more, which is, a fourth kind of key point here is something that I think your wife does better than any human on earth, which is she celebrates. And I was thinking because it hasn't been too long. We had this ridiculously late Easter this year, and so Easter was just not too long ago. And I just remember over the last 2 decades hearing about these Easter baskets, but the Easter baskets are not an anomaly in Anne's rhythm of celebrating. So talk a little bit, tell people about these Easter baskets, and then
Well,
talk to us about celebrating.
well, you gotta say that I didn't really come from as much like celebrating. So I first met Ann, I'm like, what is this? This can't be normal, and this can't be right. And but she celebrates life, and she celebrates others, and she loves to give. And so she's built into our rhythm, and now she's got it all into me. But at Easter, we don't just have like it's like every cousin, niece, nephew, they come, and first we have an Easter egg hunt, and you have to find a special egg that's got a special golden 5 golden coins in it, and you can turn it in for your basket. But Chris, the basket that you get, it's like Christmas time at our house. It's just unreal. And she shops for it all year long, and she loves seeing that delight in others. But she enjoys the celebration, and I just feel like that this has been a big part of what has given us such a joyous marriage of 40 years is celebration. That, in a sense, taking time in a regular rhythm to celebrate. As I was saying at the beginning of our program, we might work really hard, and Ann works really hard in ministry, but we've really been pretty good over the years of taking time to go and vacate and just celebrate. So we kind of are that work hard, play hard, but the celebration is intentional, and it has to have a rhythm that's there in your life. And if something happens when there's celebration, our kids just surprised us with a surprise anniversary party and invited some of my childhood friends that hadn't seen in a while. It came, had some people that travel great distances to be there, and just it was just a big surprise celebration. I couldn't even believe, we still were shaking our head. I can't even believe they did it. But what we felt after that, we felt after just being at a party that I felt two things: let marriage be held in honor by all. Something I say at every wedding. Well, this is what we're doing. We're like letting marriage be held in honor, but we're also just celebrating it. And you're in the midst of that, and what you're doing is you're remembering all the God moments. You're remembering every good thing that's come from God. I think this is what celebration does, and God created us for this. He created us to have the joy of the Lord be our strength, Nehemiah 8:10. But he also created us to be commemorating his goodness and anticipating his future grace. So, 7 different feasts in the life of Israel, 3 different seasons: spring, summer, and fall. If you were in ancient Israel, you were either getting ready to go celebrate, or you were cleaning up from the celebration and thinking about the next one, because God implemented that. So, every week, the Sabbath, a celebration. Every spring, 3 different feasts at Passover time, a celebration. Every summer, Pentecost, a big celebration. Every fall, go live in leafy booths. Kids have a great time, have a feast of booths, and you celebrate at the tabernacles. I mean, he just built that in. So, how much more so in the life of the Christian? And Jesus, I think, in that sense, just understood how important it was to convey this. So he said, the kingdom of God is really like a giant wedding party, the biggest celebration in the ancient Middle East. And so, incorporating celebration into our marriage has been one of the keys. And I think that is a perfect mirror of what it is to be in covenant with God. God is celebrating his children and singing over them, and we're celebrating God. And as we do that, joy infuses our relationship with God, and joy infuses our relationship with one another.
Yeah. So just as a reminder, the four key lessons for a marriage, and what it's taught you about Christ's covenant with us is number one, um, unconditional love that's rooted in choice is what we really see in the covenant with God. Number two is we want to be headed in the same direction. Number three is we want to speak blessing over each other, not curse, and we want that to be kind of the echo of our households. And then number four is celebrate well, play hard, celebrate well, rest well. Pastor Allen, I want to point our listeners to two resources if they want to dig a little deeper in this. And one of them is a DVD series that you called Good News for Your Marriage, that people can go to pastorallen.org and they can get that. And there's also a devotional called Grace Times Two that our listeners can go. They can go through it together as a couple. Talk just a little bit about that DVD series and what this book, Grace Times Two, means for you.
Well, we called it Grace Times Two because I believe that the power of transformation lies in the good news announcement of the gospel. And I heard somebody put it this way: if you want to improve your marriage, you don't need to just try harder. You don't need more good advice. You need more good news. If good news, if gospel saturation changes us in our personal sanctification, then also that will be the case for marriage. And that's what Grace Time 2 is all about, is a deep dive into gospel truths as they relate to our marriage, with then really good reflection questions that couples can spend time talking to each other about, and a prayer that they can pray together. It's a really, really good tool, Grace Times 2, and the accompanying video series.
Yeah, so both of those are available at pastorallen.org. Pastor Allen, I want to tease our next episode because in a couple of weeks we're going to be back, and it's going to be an interview with you and Ann, wonderful Ann, talking about your story together and reflecting just on the sweetness of 40 years together. So I'm excited for our listeners who may have never heard or seen from Ann, anything from Ann. First of all, she's way more likable than you, and she's also, no joke, among the funniest humans on earth. So it will be great.
I'm
It will
looking
be great.
forward.
And thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Inside Grace with Alan Wright. We're so thankful to be able to dive deep on the issues of the gospel so that you can use these as tools to see your life in a whole new light. We'll be back in a couple weeks with a brand new episode.